I spent 7 years paying my parents' mortgage, believing I was investing in my future. Then, at my sister's wedding, my dad announced they were giving her the house, as a gift. No warning. No discussion. Just a public betrayal wrapped in a champagne toast. I smiled through the pain, but in that moment I made a silent promise. They'd never use me like that again. Want to know how I got my revenge? Keep watching. I'm Amanda Mercer, a 34-year-old Chicago real estate agent who has dedicated her professional life to assisting others in locating their ideal residences. I made sure my parents kept the house where I grew up by regularly paying their mortgage for 7 years. Next came the day of my sister Cassidy's wedding. My world fell apart when my father said that the family home would be given to her as a wedding present. The champagne glass almost fell out of my hand as I stood motionless. Let me know where you're watching from before I go on to explain how I found out my parents had handed away the house I was paying for. If you've ever had family members take advantage of your kindness, please like and subscribe. In the Chicago suburbs where I grew up, our family's Maple Street house stood for security and coziness. It was a modest 2-story colonial with blue shutters, but it was replete with memories. My mother, Evelyn, was a 3rd-grade teacher at the neighborhood elementary school, and my father, Graham, was an accountant at a medium-sized company. We lived predictable lives with Sunday dinners with each other, backyard summer cookouts, and yearly holiday customs that never altered. I was 7 years old when my sister Cassidy moved in. Unquestionably, our parents' treatment of us differed from the start. My 10th birthday was when I first became aware of it. The sleepover party I had requested was cut back to just 2 friends, because parties are expensive. 3 months later, Cassidy's 5th birthday included 20 classmates, a professional face painter, and a rented bounce house. I put it down to her being the family's infant at the time. However, the pattern persisted as we aged. I was advised to hold off on getting braces for another year so that my insurance would pay for them later. Cassidy received hers right away. My 16th birthday was celebrated with driving lessons. Cassidy's Sweet 16 was accompanied with a dependable although worn Honda Civic. My parents used a variety of justifications to explain these discrepancies, such as better timing, better financial circumstances, or, most frequently, your sister needs more support than you do. You're so independent. That self-reliance wasn't natural. It was cultivated out of need. When I was in high school, I realized that I had to work for what I desired. At 14, I began babysitting, and at 16, I took a weekend job at the neighborhood grocery shop. During college breaks, I worked almost full-time hours. Cassidy's only duty at the time was to keep up her marks, which she hardly did. The gap was further extended by college. I worked 3 part-time jobs to make up the difference of my partial scholarship at State University. My parents gave roughly $1,500 a semester, or what we can afford, as they put it. They managed to pay for Cassidy's entire tuition at a private liberal arts college, stating, "She wouldn't manage with student loans like you can." I loved my family and came to terms with the fact that this was just the way we were. I majored in business with a real estate concentration, directing my energies toward creating my own success. Just after I finished, the 2008 financial crisis struck, making it extremely difficult to find a home. I persevered, working as an administrative assistant at a small agency and getting my real estate license at night, while many of my classmates gave up on their career goals. All of my resolve was put to the test during those formative years. I lived on coffee and ramen, drove a car that broke down every month, and lived in a small studio apartment with used furniture. I made exactly 2 sales in my first year as an agent, which was barely enough to pay for necessities. Other than the rare home-cooked dinner during visits, my parents provided minimal assistance, always with the tactful advice that I go into a more secure employment route. In my 3rd year, I made a breakthrough when I got to know a wealthy client who wanted to sell her mansion on the lake. Her social network referred me since she was happy with my service. All of a sudden, I became an expert in luxury real estate. I had leased a new automobile, moved into a cozy condo in the heart of downtown, and made a name for myself as a rising star in Chicago real estate by the time I was 28. Cassidy vacillated between a number of passion pursuits throughout this period. She worked in a gallery for a short time after earning her degree in art history, but she soon realized it wasn't spiritually satisfying. After that, She worked as a personal assistant and a barista before deciding to become a yoga instructor, and taught a few courses a week at a fancy facility. Her lifestyle, which included frequent brunches, weekend getaways, and an unexpectedly large wardrobe, seemed unaffected by her erratic income. Her secret was straightforward. Our parents kept paying for her upbringing. They gave her a broad safety net that allowed her to approach adulthood carefree, paid her phone bill, and assisted with rent when she ran out of money. During family get-togethers, I observed similar things but kept quiet since I thought Cassidy would eventually have to be able to support herself. The first family crisis followed. One evening my father called, his voice unusually tremulous. He had been part of a company-wide downsizing at the age of 58. He was unemployed with a severance payment that would last little more than 6 months after 30 years with the same company. My mother was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis about the same time, necessitating costly treatments that her school district insurance only partially covered. He insisted during our weekly calls that, "We're managing." But his voice seemed strained to me. While my mother was showing me her garden on a Sunday 3 months later, I noticed past due notifications on the kitchen counter. My parents hesitantly acknowledged that they had fallen behind on their mortgage payments when pressed. Their pride had kept them from disclosing the entire scope of their financial difficulties. My father reassured me that it would only last temporarily, and that we would catch up once I found another job. However, there were few accounting positions available for professionals who were getting close to retirement age, and my mother's medical bills kept rising. I gave them an offer after a restless night of weighing their options. I will pay their mortgage until they were able to get their finances back on track. In addition, I would assist with uninsured medical expenditures. Any doubt was erased by the relief on their expressions. "Someday you will still inherit this," my mother remarked with tears in her eyes. "In the end, the house will always belong to you. Amanda, we will never forget this." As my father's job search dragged on for months on end, what had started out as a temporary arrangement grew. Eventually, he was able to secure a part-time consulting job that paid a little but offered no benefits. In order to accommodate her health limits, my mother cut back on her teaching schedule. I sent the mortgage payment and additional funds for groceries and utilities straight to their bank each month. I took them to appointments and assisted with housework during their monthly visits. Cassidy's life, meanwhile, went on despite our parents' difficulties. As she followed her new interest of going to yoga retreats and spiritual courses, she stopped going home as much. She brought mementos but provided no real assistance when she did show up for birthdays or holidays. She never recognized my financial assistance, if she was aware of it. When Cassidy met Chase Taylor at a charity banquet she was attending with a wealthy client from her yoga studio, everything changed. Chase, the son of a well-known family that owns multiple auto dealerships around the Midwest, was enamored with my sister's bold demeanor and attractive appearance right away. Instagram images of them at upscale restaurants, weekend trips on his family's private jet, and courtside seats at Bulls games demonstrated how quickly their whirlwind affair developed. During one of my visits, my mother exclaimed, "He's different from the others. Very well established and from a good family." I saw my parents suddenly rekindling their enthusiasm for things that had previously proven too challenging, like dinner parties when Chase came to town, shopping excursions with Cassidy, and even repainting the guest room that had been unfinished for years. When it came to taking part in my sister's exciting new relationship, their financial limitations seemed to be disregarded. Chase proposed 6 months after we first met, wearing a diamond ring that most likely cost more than my yearly mortgage payment. The planning of the wedding suddenly took over our family's life. My first clue that our family dynamic was changing was the engagement celebration held at the Taylor family's country club. With its colonial clubhouse, the expansive golf course property was typically occupied by politicians and celebrities rather than middle-class families like ours. However, my parents moved through the room with unexpected ease and made their introductions to Chase's contacts with ease. Since I had planned the event in between property showings, I arrived by myself. Even though I was a successful professional, I felt quite uncomfortable among guests who talked about summer homes and trips in Europe. In contrast to the fashionable attire all around me, my fitted black dress, which often exudes confidence during business meetings, looked insufficient. "At last, Amanda, you succeeded." With a wave from a group of people I didn't recognize, my mother called. Her eyes were bright with enthusiasm, and her cheeks were rosy from the champagne. I overheard the finish of their chat as I got closer. My mother was adding, "The wedding gift is going to be absolutely perfect. A foundation upon which they can construct their future." When I got to the women, they gave me a nod of approval and started to scatter. My mother gave me a contemptuous pat on the arm when I inquired about the wedding present she was referring about. "Oh, just a few concepts we're thinking about. Not yet certain. The crab cakes, have you tried them? They are divine." Although it was clear that the topic had changed, I didn't ask more questions. I overheard several quiet discussions between my parents and Chase's folks over the evening, which were full of heartfelt looks and animated nods. I was not going to be part of whatever they had planned. My father called me 2 weeks after the engagement party to ask if I might temporarily raise my monthly contribution. "The roof is showing some wear," he clarified. "We've got a contractor coming to give an estimate, but we should probably handle it before winter." Without hesitation, I consented and transferred an extra $2,000. But there was no indication of roofing construction or preparations when I dropped by unannounced the next weekend. Rather, I discovered Cassidy and my mother surrounded by fabric swatches, wedding magazines, and a half-empty bottle of champagne. "Just getting some initial ideas," my mother said, assembling the supplies in a hurry. "Nothing extravagant." In contrast, the caterer's estimate, which was on display on the coffee table, indicated that each plate would cost more than most people would pay for a full dinner out. My mother got defensive when I politely asked her about priorities. "This is Cassidy's special day. We've put aside some savings specifically for this." I inquired, "What savings?" as I was well aware of their financial circumstances. "You wouldn't understand," my father interrupted from his chair. "Some things are worth stretching for." That was the end of the chat, but my worries increased. The next week I told Harper Quinn, my best friend, during lunch. I pushed my salad about the plate and asked, "Am I crazy for feeling uneasy about this? I mean, it's their money ultimately." Harper's face became serious. "Except it's not just their money, is it? You've been keeping them afloat for years. Have they ever talked about paying you back?" "That wasn't the arrangement," I acknowledged. "I never expected repayment. But I also didn't expect them to suddenly find thousands for a lavish wedding." Harper gently offered, "It sounds like you might be enabling them. Maybe it's time to set some boundaries around your contributions." Knowing she was correct, I nodded. However, it seemed unfeasible to face my parents about money. They required my assistance after raising me and providing for me in their own manner. How could I suddenly tie that help up with strings? The financial irregularities increased along with the wedding preparations. Due to financial limitations, my parents turned down dinner invitations. Yet, they were able to pay for engagement pictures at an upscale resort. In addition to talking about the handmade mother-of-the-bride clothing that was being made for her, my mother remarked that she had reduced the number of therapy sessions she attended because they were too expensive. Most worryingly, I started to get shut out of family events like Cassidy's bridal shower, cake tastings, and location tours. These occurrences were later brought to my attention via casual mentions or social media. The responses I received when I inquired as to why I hadn't been included were consistently variants of, "We didn't want to bother you," or, "We know how busy you are with work." I kept up my mortgage payments, property taxes, and medical expense contributions in the interim. Every month, the sum came close to $3,000. Which I had first intended to use to purchase a second home. After 7 years of this agreement, I had contributed more than $245,000. I dropped off my mother's birthday present at my parents' residence 6 months before to the wedding. The lights were on inside, but there were no automobiles in the driveway. I called out as soon as I entered the foyer using my key. There was silence in the dining room. My parents were sitting with an older man in a suit when I turned the corner. The table was strewn with papers. "Amanda, we weren't expecting you," my mother remarked hastily as she gathered the papers into a folder. I put the wrapped item on the sideboard and said, "I apologize for interrupting, but I brought your birthday gift." Reluctantly, my father said, "This is Mr. Patterson. I'm the stranger. Our attorney. Just updating some paperwork." With no further explanation, the man gave a courteous nod. After a moment of awkward silence, my mother recommended that we have coffee in the kitchen, which essentially kicked me out of the dining room. I sensed her anxious energy while we waited for the coffee to brew. Mugs are rearranged. Wiping counters that are already clean. I inquired. Is everything okay? You're not having legal problems, are you? Nothing like that, she swiftly reassured me. Just getting some affairs in order. At our age, it's important to have everything properly documented. My father joined us before I could ask him any more questions, his face abnormally upbeat. Good news, Amanda. You won't have to worry about the house anymore soon. My gut clenched as I asked myself, what does that mean? A vague, just that we're making some adjustments to simplify things, was his response. Nothing for you to concern yourself with now. Safe topics like Cassidy's wedding plans, my recent sales, and neighborhood news took over the conversation. But my father's remarks reverberated uneasily as I drove home that night. They were purposefully keeping me in the dark about something important. Cassidy's wedding day came on a gorgeous Saturday in June. Thousands of white roses, crystal chandeliers, and special lighting that cost more than my first car had been used to transform the historic Palmer House Hotel in downtown Chicago. As a bridesmaid, I had been at the location since the sun came up, negotiating the meticulous coordination of the photographers, hairstylists, and makeup artists, as well as my sister's periodic tantrums over trivial matters. As I fixed her veil, she grumbled. The champagne isn't properly chilled. And the florist used cream roses when I specifically requested ivory. Recalling my mother's request from that morning, I bit my tongue. Please assist in making this ideal for your sister. The most significant day of her life is today. In order to resolve the disastrous discrepancy between cream and ivory roses, I cooled champagne, calmed bridesmaid tensions, and located the wedding planner. I kept a trained smile on my face the entire time, even as I estimated the approximate cost of every luxury that surrounded us. Everything about the ceremony went perfectly. As they exchanged vows, Chase looked truly in love, and Cassidy looked stunning in her expensive gown. My father was beaming with pride, while my mother was wiping away tears with an embroidered handkerchief as they sat in the front row. We appeared to be the ideal American family commemorating a significant occasion. I sat at the family table during the reception, sipping a single glass of champagne and chit-chatting with Chase's relatives. For what I felt was about to happen, I needed clarity. I saw my parents crowded with Chase's relatives during the cocktail hour, exchanging meaningful glances and hushed chatter. It would happen soon, whatever surprise they had in store. My father got up and tapped his glass to get attention after the main course. As he started his moving statement about seeing his youngest daughter blossom into the stunning woman in front of us, the crowd became silent. He talked about the value of solid foundations, family legacy, and the satisfaction that comes from assisting the next generation in starting their journey. Which is why, he added in an emotional tone, your mother and I are giving you our home as your wedding gift. The house where you grew up, where we've made so many memories, is now yours to fill with new ones. Applause broke out in the room. At neighboring tables, patrons grinned with approval and murmured about the thoughtfulness and generosity of the present. Cassidy let out a theatrical gasp and gripped Chase's arm while tears fell down her cheeks. As she accepted the congrats from everyone around her, my mother wiped her own eyes. The half-empty champagne flute shook a little in my hand as I sat still. Mortgage payments for 7 years. 60 transfers per month. Innumerable extra payments for insurance, taxes, and repairs. All for a house that had just been sold without any prior discussion. My head was filled with memories. My mother's heartfelt appreciation when I initially offered to assist. My father's constant promises. One day you'll own the house. Weekends spent maintaining the property I thought would one day be mine, painting rooms and repairing leaking faucets. During this time, my sister led a carefree life and only occasionally attended Sunday dinners and holidays. I remained composed throughout supper by sheer willpower. I smiled for pictures, mechanically joined in toasts, and even managed to give Cassidy a hug when she exclaimed about how wonderful our parents' gift was. But as the dance started and everyone's attention was diverted, I discreetly packed up my belongings and snuck out a side door. I drove straight to my parents' house, or as I now realize, my sister's house, instead of returning home. Knowing they would go back there to change before going to their hotel downtown, I parked in the driveway and waited. The recognizable building stood out in the shadows. Each wall, window, and shutter stood for years of my sacrifice. Still dressed in formal wear, they arrived just after midnight. When they saw my automobile, their faces changed from astonishment to fatigue. When they got to the front door, I went outside. My mother fumbled with her clutch and said, "Amanda, why aren't you at the reception?" I just said, "We need to talk," and I followed them inside. I eventually posed the question that had been bothering me in the living room, which was still decked out with pre-wedding pictures and presents. How could you give away a house I've been paying for without even discussing it with me? Without looking at me, my father untied his tie. "It's our house, Amanda. We appreciated your help during our rough patch, but ultimately, it's our name on the deed. Was your name on the checks I wrote every month for 7 years? Was your name on the statements for the new roof last year? Or the property taxes I covered when you came up short? That was your choice," my mother said in a startlingly icy tone. "We never forced you to help us. You said it would be my inheritance. You literally told me I was investing in my future." My dad let out a deep sigh. Plans change. Cassidy and Chase need a stable home to start their family. They can't afford something comparable in this neighborhood on their own. And I can? "I've been putting my own financial goals on hold to help you," my mom retorted. "You're already successful. You have your condo, your career. Cassidy needs this foundation to get started in life." From there, the conversation soured. Every explanation they provided exposed a more profound treachery. 2 months prior, they had given the deed to Cassidy and Chase, which explains the enigmatic encounter with the lawyer. Prior to the transfer, they had utilized my most recent contributions, roughly $12,000 that I had set aside expressly for home repairs and medical expenses, to pay down the outstanding mortgage balance. Their total rejection of my monetary donations as gifts given voluntarily rather than as investments made under false pretenses was the most painful. My father literally sneered when I told him the total amount. More than $245,000. "That's an exaggeration. And anyway, that's what family does. We support each other." Apparently only when the family member is Cassidy. I brought my purse to my lips. I won't be supporting anyone in this family anymore. I was so angry and heartbroken that I sobbed as I drove home. The trust one believed to be there with my parents had turned out to be wholly false. They had never thought of me as an equal child who should be treated with the same respect as my sister. I was the trustworthy one. The one that was successful. The one who didn't require their allegiance or support. I had to fundamentally reevaluate how I saw my family and my role in it that evening as I lay on my couch and gazed at the Chicago skyline through tear-streaked eyes. A blur of work appointments and avoiding phone calls characterized the week after the wedding. My parents left voicemails that ranged from worried to irritated, and at first they called every day, then every few days. Cassidy only mentioned the house in one text message, thanking me for being a part of her wonderful day. I didn't answer any of them. I needed time to go through my feelings and decide what to do next. My work became my haven. I volunteered for the listings that no one else wanted, held open houses on the weekends and booked showings back to back. When coworkers remarked on my increased zeal, I retaliated by making jokes about vacation savings. In actuality, every house I saw made me painfully compare it to the house I had paid for years, and that was now being given away without a single thought. It was more difficult at night. Sleep eluded me as I tallied the opportunity costs of my years of providing for my parents, the professional growth chances I'd foregone, the retirement contributions I'd cut, and the down payment on an investment property I'd postponed in order to keep up my monthly commitment to them. One especially restless night, I constructed a spreadsheet that included all of the payments I had made, including groceries, utilities, medical bills, home repairs, property taxes, and mortgage contributions. Over the course of 7 years, the total surpassed $165,000. My determination to seek expert guidance was solidified when I saw the figure in black and white. I met with Samantha Ford, a financial advisor who was referred by a coworker, on Monday morning to go over my paperwork. Her questions showed her assessment, yet her face stayed neutral in a professional manner. Was there a formal contract in place for these contributions? Nothing official, I said. It was an arrangement within the family. It was verbally agreed that I would someday own the house. They kept saying that I was making investments for my inheritance. She took notes while nodding. Regretfully, in the absence of documentation, this is a legal murky area. Although family court battles are costly and emotionally taxing, you might be able to bring a civil action based on verbal contract or unjust enrichment. What advice would you give? To be honest, think of it as a costly lesson in combining finances and family without the necessary paperwork. Stop all financial assistance right away. Continue to safeguard your possessions and establish limits for the type of connection you wish to have with your family. Even though it was hard to hear, her advice was clear. I wrote a thorough email to my folks that night. I formally declared the immediate withdrawal of all financial support, detailed all of the payments I had made, and clarified my understanding of our agreement. It was a final pronouncement rather than an offer to bargain, and the tone was professional rather than sentimental. They responded in a matter of hours. An emotional, long communication that veered between manipulative guilt and defensive justification. The majority of it was written by my mother, who emphasized Cassidy's needs over my stability, invoked family loyalty, and implied that I was being self-centered for removing assistance after they had reared me and given me life. My father included a short line in which he expressed dissatisfaction with my transactional view of family dynamics. Neither admitted the underlying betrayal. The financial ramifications of their activities were not addressed by either of them. It was obvious from reading between the lines that they wanted our relationship to continue as it had, with my emotional support still there but without my cash contributions. What I needed to know was confirmed by the email. If I didn't compel that shift, nothing would change. Cassidy and Chase, meantime, returned from their Bali honeymoon and moved into the house right away. Her Instagram turned into a showcase for her remodeling projects, including tearing out the kitchen my parents had used for 30 years, painting over the laundry room growth chart that displayed our respective heights as children, and replacing the backyard garden my mother had lovingly tended with a hot tub and outdoor kitchen. Every change seemed like another severing of my bond with the house. 3 weeks after the wedding, the most agonizing was a happy text message with pictures attached. Making significant alterations to your former bedroom. Would you like to visit before the contractors finish? During this time, Harper helped me keep things in perspective. Her constant presence served as a counterpoint to the emotional upheaval when we got together for coffee once a week. She took my phone, banned my sister's number without remark, and returned it with the simple statement, "Not helpful right now," after I showed her Cassidy's text. She was correct. As I reconstructed my understanding of my family relationships, distance was the only thing keeping me sane. Through June and July, I stuck to my no-contact policy, putting more of an emphasis on reestablishing my financial plan and getting back in touch with friends I had ignored while putting my family's needs first. Then the silence was broken by the call. Using his workplace number, which I hadn't banned, my father left a seemingly casual voicemail. "It's Dad, Amanda. I hope all is okay with you. I've been considering our living arrangement with your mother. Cassidy and Chase are eager to have their solitude as newlyweds, and the house is just too big for us right now. We're thinking about our alternatives for the upcoming months. Let's get together soon." There was no apology in the message. No recognition of our dispute. Just a clear indication that housing is required. The voicemail followed me around even though I didn't answer the phone. Did they actually receive a request to vacate the residence they had given away? Had they made such a significant decision without first taking into account their own living arrangements? A week later, I received a second call, this time from my mom. "Sweetheart, we haven't heard from you in ages. We're having a small family dinner Sunday and really hope you'll join us. There are some things we'd like to discuss about our future plans." No mention of our conflict again. No recognition of my emotions. There was only the assumption that I would show up for family supper, summoned as usual. I texted back that I couldn't because of job obligations. Following the brief conversation, several texts were sent, each with ambiguous allusions to their temporary living situation and tactful indications that they might soon want housing. The implication became more obvious. My parents now anticipated to move into my holiday property, a modest lakeside cottage in Michigan that I had bought the year before as a personal getaway and rental venture, after they had given up their house. Despite helping them, the property was one of the few financial objectives I had been able to accomplish. The entire cost was covered by commissions from a particularly prosperous quarter. I had never told them outright that they were not allowed to use it. Actually, I had thought about giving it to them as a retirement option prior to the wedding betrayal. It felt like another instance of their entitlement to my resources, without reciprocal consideration, now that they assumed it would be accessible automatically. When my parents unexpectedly showed up at my condo on a Tuesday night, it was the expected direct request. When the doorman called, I briefly thought about turning down the visit. I agreed to visit them since putting off the inevitable would only make things worse. They brought peace offerings, including a bottle of wine and my mother's handmade lasagna, which we had once enjoyed together at a nice Christmas meal. Intentionally refusing to accept their outerwear, I guided them to my dining room, where the familiarity evoked unwanted reminiscence. A subtle clue that this was not a visit for social purposes. My father cleared his throat after engaging in awkward small conversation about neighborhood developments and the summer weather. We wanted to discuss our predicament with you face to face, Amanda. You are aware that Cassidy and Chase now own the house, so it makes sense that they would want to personalize it. My mother explained. They've asked us to move out by the end of the month, her face implying that this deadline was irrational, even though it had been 2 months since they had sold their house. My father went on to say, we've been looking at apartments, but rental prices in good neighborhoods are astronomical. Additionally, given your mother's medical condition, we require a cozy and convenient location. I waited, unwilling to provide solutions that would ease the situation. At last, my mother added, we were considering your lake house. The place is ideal for your father's blood pressure, and it's just sitting empty most of the time. According to the doctor, a more tranquil setting would be beneficial. I was stunned for a second by the assumption. As if nothing had happened, they had come expecting access to my second property after weeks of no serious communication after a huge betrayal. No recognition of the suffering they had inflicted. No acknowledgement of the limits I had set. Just the presumption of entitlement, not even a straight question. The lake house, I said carefully again. My father hastily added, just until we figure out something permanent. At most 6 months or a year. We wouldn't interfere with your plans to rent during the busiest times of the year. The lake house, a simple 3-bedroom cottage on a tiny lake in Michigan, came to mind. Bought completely out of my own funds following years of careful budgeting. The weekends spent carefully outfitting it, painting the walls and changing the fixtures. During quiet months, the rental revenue helped to augment my commissions. The private haven it offered when the noise of the city got to be too much. It won't be possible, I finally said. My mother's face changed from one of anticipation to one of perplexity. What are you saying? I mean, no. I don't let you remain at my lake house. As if I hadn't grasped her point, she said. But it's just sitting empty most of the time. That isn't important. I paid for it, so it's my property. Additionally, I don't want to alter my usage of it. With a worried brow, my father leaned forward. You're being overly emotional, Amanda. We are discussing the topic of family supporting family. Following all that we have done for you. The boldness of that utterance shattered my poise. After all of your assistance to me? I mean, what have I done for you? With the knowledge that I was investing in my future inheritance, I made 7 years' worth of mortgage payments, property taxes, and home maintenance. An inheritance that you left Cassidy without speaking to her at all. With a dismissive tone, my mother responded, that's water under the bridge now. We must concentrate on existing solutions. Finding an apartment that you can afford is the present option, I said calmly. Just like any other adult would do in your situation. They looked at one another, obviously unprepared for strong opposition. In contract negotiations, my father took a conciliatory tone. Look, I know that the home still bothers you, but this isn't the same. We are merely requesting permission to temporarily occupy the lake, not the actual land. I stood up to end the conversation and stated, I need time to think about this. I'll inform you of my choice later this week. I called Harper as soon as they left, and she showed up half an hour later with a bottle of tequila and our common friend Tess Callahan as reinforcements. Their faces changed from incredulity to outrage as I described the exchange. As she poured another round of cocktails, Harper remarked, the absolute nerve. They want you to move into your vacation property after giving up a house you've been paying for? Does that make sense in what universe? Tess gave a forceful nod. Following the split of my parents, my father attempted a similar endeavor. Gave my brother their savings for his business, and then anticipated that he would temporarily come in with me when he was unable to pay for his apartment. Unless you set clear boundaries, these patterns don't change, Harper continued. That's precisely what you must do. Unchangeable, unambiguous boundaries with repercussions they comprehend. We worked together to create my answer, which was a polite but strong rejection that recognized their predicament without taking ownership of it. The main ideas were straightforward. I wouldn't provide either short-term or long-term living at my lake house. I wouldn't start providing financial assistance again. Any future partnership would be contingent upon their acknowledging the betrayal and taking corrective action. I saw my parents 3 days later at a coffee shop halfway between our houses, which was a neutral setting. The public location was purposefully chosen to reduce the likelihood of an emotional scenario. I got there early and chose a corner table that provided some seclusion without being totally alone. Together, they went inside, my father keeping his customary assured stance as my mother nervously looked around the store. Their manner and mine were so different from one another. I set the tone right away by bringing notes and dressing properly. This was not a family conversation. It was a transaction. After a few brief welcomes, I started. I've considered your request. And no is my response. I will not give you the lake house to live in, either permanently or temporarily. My mother's expression dimmed. However, where should we go? I said calmly. That's a question you should have thought about before giving away your home. There are plenty of apartments in your price range, particularly if you search outside of the city center. With a hint of rage in his voice, my father remarked, "We've raised you better than this. Family looks out for family." I wholeheartedly concur. I provided for my family for 7 years by paying your mortgage, your property taxes, and your medical expenses. When you sold the house without telling me and used my own funds to pay off the outstanding mortgage, for Cassidy's benefit, that commitment came to an end. A folder was slid across the table by me. Printouts of rental listings that fit their budget were included. All of these can be used with your present income and are available right now. Additionally, I've provided details about senior living communities with features that meet your needs. Without opening the folder, my mother pushed it away. We're not elderly. We are your parents, and we are in need of your assistance during this time of change. I answered. You created a transition by revealing your stable housing situation. I'm establishing a limit. I'm not going to house you, and I'm not going to start paying again. Any future partnership hinges on your admission of the harm your actions caused me, and your efforts to make things right. My dad's expression grew stern. That's it then? For financial reasons, you abandon your family. Money is not the issue here. It all comes down to honesty, decency, and respect, which were all absent when, without consulting me, you made judgments that had an immediate impact on me. For 20 more minutes, the discourse circled around well-known topics. They tried to reframe their acts as typical parental authority, downplayed my feelings, and placed a strong emphasis on family duty. I remained cool but firm in my stance, finally getting up to put an end to the conversation. My choice is final. I hope you quickly find acceptable housing. The consequences were rapid and extensive. Cassidy called me that night from a different number, avoiding my block. She accused me of leaving our parents homeless, and of being jealous of her happiness, her voice quivering with outrage. She interrupted me as I tried to convey my viewpoint. This is not how Chase and I would ever treat family. She hung up after that. After my parents presented their meticulously crafted version of events, members of my extended family took sides. Suddenly, I received messages from aunts and uncles who had never shown interest in me, casting doubt on my morals and reminding me of the importance of family devotion. My hardly spoken cousins started making ambiguous remarks about supporting parents in their golden years on social media, which was obviously directed at me. I answered once. I wrote the extended family a single group email outlining the conditions of the house transfer and the 7 years of financial support I had given. The message concluded with a forceful declaration that I would not participate in any more public discourse, and a clear plea for privacy during this family crisis. After that, I muted social media accounts, band numbers, and concentrated on starting over without the burden of unfair expectations. The discomfort was severe at first. However, I became more aware of the toxic dynamics I had tolerated for years with every passing day. For the first time, I was putting my health before the irrational expectations of other people. And even though it was challenging, it felt liberating after years of submersion. There was little communication for 2 months. I found out that my parents had located a 2-bedroom apartment in a suburb 15 minutes from their previous residence through mutual acquaintances. Cassidy sent fewer updates about the renovations, indicating that once reality set in, the initial excitement had faded. My own life began to follow new routines. I treated the lake cottage like a real retreat and went there more frequently. I made greater investments in friendships that had deteriorated over years of parental responsibilities. I re-established contact with aspects of myself that I had neglected. The distance was therapeutic. I rediscovered lost hobbies when I wasn't surrounded by demands from my family. I joined a book club, took weekend painting lessons, and even began casual dating for the first time in years. The focus of therapy sessions changed from managing crises to long-term personal growth. Most significantly, I started to identify the patterns from my family relationships that had subtly influenced every contact I had. The propensity to overfunction, the inability to establish boundaries, and the tendency to prioritize the needs of others over my own. Success at work persisted and increased. I got a competitive listing for the conversion of a historic mansion in September, a historic building with several opulent condominiums. The commission would significantly boost my yearly income, confirming my choice to prioritize professional growth over ongoing family assistance. Then, on a cool October morning, as I was going over the new listings marketing materials in my downtown office, my assistant hesitantly knocked. "Graham Williams is here to visit you. No appointment. He claims to be your father." My first reaction was to say no, but I was paused by something in her face. "How does he appear?" I inquired. She paused. "Nervous, perhaps a touch depressed. He expressed his understanding of your hectic schedule, but hoped you might find time for lunch." I was intrigued by the visit's unexpectedness. My father had always favored phone calls to in-person discussions, particularly when discussing sensitive subjects. His presence in my office raised the possibility of anything more than our typical exchanges. "Tell him I have 30 minutes to spare. We can continue over lunch if the discussion calls for extra time." My father, who appeared older than I recalled, walked in warily. His generally flawless appearance began to reveal small symptoms of deterioration: new creases around his eyes, a slightly rumpled shirt, and less meticulously combed hair. He placed a tiny gift bag he was carrying on my desk with care. "Your mom's homemade brownies," he said, grinning awkwardly. "I recall that you loved them the most." I gestured toward the visitor's chair and thanked him without opening the bag. "This is not what I expected." He sat, his hands moving in an unusual way, and added, "I've wanted to talk to you for weeks. However, I wasn't certain you would answer my phone." He let out a deep exhale. "Since before the wedding, things haven't been right." "No, they haven't," I concurred in a neutral voice. He inhaled deeply. "Amanda, I've come to apologize. I must accept responsibility for the awful mistakes I committed that caused you great pain." I was taken aback by the candor. My dad was not one to take responsibility for his actions. To keep control of the story, he favored rephrasing occurrences. I didn't say anything, giving him room. He went on to say, "The house situation was handled incredibly poorly. You merited consultation, thoughtfulness, and gratitude for all of your contributions. Rather, we disregarded your feelings after the fact and kept you out of decision-making." "Why?" For months, the question had been gnawing at me. He let out a sigh. "The short answer is that I didn't defend what was right, and your mother planned the majority of it." The more complex response is, my father gave me the background I had never known during the course of the following hour. Cassidy had always been preferred by my mother, who saw in her the social success she had never attained. She was determined to keep the relationship going after Chase entered the picture with his family's wealth and connections. She thought Cassidy's standing would be solidified and his family would be impressed with a lavish wedding present. He acknowledged, "I knew it was wrong, especially considering all that you had done for us." I attempted to give options, such as providing financial support that wasn't related to your inheritance or helping with the down payment on a different home. However, your mother was obsessed with the symbolic importance of providing our family with a home. And you agreed with it. I did. That is my complete failure. His voice broke. I've avoided confrontation with your mother my entire life, even if it meant mistreating you. I never had the guts to interrupt that habit, which dates back to your early years. The candor was difficult as well as validating. Truth, not psychosis, had been the basis for all those years of feeling undervalued. Favoritism had not been accidental, it had been deliberate. What has changed since then? I inquired. After several months of silence, why this apology? A number of things, he stated. I now have a better understanding of what we took from you and what we gave up since moving into the apartment. Chase and Cassidy are already experiencing issues. I start to doubt the sacrifice. He hesitated. Most significantly, I initiated my own therapy. I can now notice patterns that I was previously blind to. He extended his hand across the desk, somewhat crossing the gap but not quite touching my hand. Amanda, I don't expect your forgiveness right now. What I did, was actually harmful. I just wanted to let you know that I now understand it. Additionally, I'm trying to improve. In contrast to the father I had known for the majority of my life, the lunch that followed felt more like a talk with a stranger. He inquired intelligently about my hobbies, friends, and job. Subjects that in the past had hardly captured his interest. He gave them updates on his new acquaintances in their apartment complex and his part-time consultancy job. Above all, he talked of going to social gatherings without my mother, gaining a sense of independence that had long been lacking in their relationship. How about Mom? As we were finishing our lunches, I inquired. Does she think the same thing you do about what happened? His face tensed. Not totally. Although she acknowledges our poor handling of the situation, she still thinks the choice was the right one. She is having difficulty adjusting to her new living situation and your distance. But not with regret, I believe. I can't get back into a relationship if the underlying issue isn't addressed. I get it, he murmured softly. I'm trying to help her. However, in the end, her journey is distinct from mine. I'm here because I need to make things right, regardless of her choices. We agreed to get together for lunch once a month. Without quickly returning to full family involvement, this is a modest step toward restoring trust. I experienced a complex range of feelings as I watched him go, his shoulders more straight than when he had first arrived. These included lingering hurt and a cautious optimism that real transformation might be achievable. When my mother contacted me 2 weeks later, it was with a formal invitation to lunch at her favorite restaurant rather than the kind of apology my father had delivered. I agreed, but with certain conditions. No mention of financial assistance. No pressure to fulfill family responsibilities. Just a chance to start repairing our broken connection. The lunch was difficult. As usual, my mother showed up in impeccable attire, her armor of perfection intact. Her greeting was loving but restrained, it lacked the sensitivity my father had displayed. After our orders were given, she started, "Your father says I need to acknowledge the misunderstanding about the house." I added softly, "It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was an erasure of my contributions and a betrayal of trust." She winced a little, but went on. "Maybe we weren't as open about it as we ought to have been. I'm sorry for that." The words were right. However, the sentiment behind them seemed flimsy. She continued to tell Cassidy that giving her the house had been the correct thing to do, albeit a badly done one, rather than a fundamentally bad one, throughout the meal. Although she admitted that my feelings had been offended, she refrained from taking responsibility for the harm. As we completed dessert, she came to the conclusion that difficult times happen to families. Hopefully we can proceed at this time. It was something, even though it wasn't the reunion I had hoped for. A little work to fix what had gone wrong. I could respect my boundaries while acknowledging that effort and keep evaluating whether more profound healing was feasible. Meanwhile, Cassidy's idyllic life started to show indications of disaster on social media. Ambiguous captions about challenges and growth opportunities replaced the once enthusiastic restoration posts. One mutual acquaintance reported overhearing conflicts at a dinner gathering. At a charity function, Chase was seen standing remarkably close to an ex-girlfriend without Cassidy. The house itself was starting to deteriorate. I drove by one evening out of curiosity. The shutter's paint is flaking off. Overgrown vegetation. A broken gutter that has been obviously damaged for a while is left hanging. Under Cassidy's care, the property that had been painstakingly maintained while owned by my parents, supported by my financial contributions, was clearly deteriorating. I did not enjoy these changes. However, they set the scene for my father's subsequent arrival. He brought up the subject of Chase's family firm being investigated for tax problems when they were having coffee in a peaceful neighborhood cafe, adding to the marital financial burden. He clarified they've started fighting over money. Cassidy had anticipated that Chase's family would pay for all of the renovations, but the legal issues caused that support to vanish. With minimal finances, they are currently dealing with contractor costs. I said in a neutral tone, "That's unfortunate." He went on to say, "Your mother is finally seeing the situation clearly." She developed the idea that Cassidy would marry into a stable and secure environment. She is now seeing things fall apart and understanding that she gave up her relationship with you in order to maintain that delusion. My mother's unexpected voicemail the next week, in which she asked if we could speak again while crying audibly, was explained by that conversation. Her first sincere admission of guilt was something fresh in the ensuing call, albeit it was still guarded on both sides. She acknowledged, "I persuaded myself that securing Cassidy's future was worth any cost. I failed to recognize how unjust that was to you. I sincerely apologize." Though not with the cinematic healing I had hoped for, the words I had been waiting months to hear had finally come. It was important to apologize. But restoring confidence would need more than just words. It did, however, open a door that I had thought was closed. A new partnership on my terms, built on respect for one another instead of duty, exploitation, or guilt. I stood in the foyer of my recently acquired Lincoln Park home, 6 months after the wedding that had destroyed the delicate foundation of our family. The 3-bedroom Victorian had needed a lot of work, but now it was fully in line with my vision. Cozy colors, contemporary elements mixed with old-world charm, areas for entertaining, and quiet nooks created just for me. More than just a real estate investment was involved in the purchase. It was a declaration that I would stop waiting for the promised life. I would create the life I was worthy of, not inherit it. A legacy. My commission on the historic mansion project, which had been even more successful than expected, had provided the down payment. Soon after, I was promoted to senior partner at the firm, which brought with it long overdue professional recognition and more financial stability. Even my lake house had changed. It was once thought of mostly as an investment property with the odd personal use, but during the family crisis it became my haven. During slower business times, weekend getaways developed into week-long retreats. In addition to customizing the decor beyond its previous basic rental appeal and cultivating relationships with year-round neighbors, I constructed a separate office space that enabled remote work. Most importantly, after being released from the continual burden of household responsibilities, my social relationships developed. The weekly dinners with Harper turned into get-togethers with a larger group of people who had similar interests and values. I became a member of organizations for professionals that I had previously ignored, creating a network of peers who valued my knowledge and supported my ongoing development. Frequent therapy sessions enabled me to identify and deal with deeply rooted tendencies that were formed throughout my early years. The overbearing obligation I took on. Having trouble communicating my own wants. A propensity to anticipate and fulfill the expectations of others before taking my own into account. These realizations eventually resulted in modifications to behavior. I started establishing boundaries, expressing expectations clearly, letting myself be supported rather than only providing it. My relationship with my parents developed into a meticulously planned system. Lunches with my father once a month turned into a regular source of joy. A more genuine connection was made possible by his sincere attempts to comprehend my viewpoint. He continued his individual therapy and fostered his increasing independence, changing our relationship from one of parent to adult. My mom was more difficult. After her heartfelt apologies, her initial progress stagnated because she found it difficult to completely accept the harm done by decades of favoritism. Our communication remained restricted to brief phone conversations and sporadic lunches, always with boundaries around appropriate subjects. Even if I still hoped for a more thorough reunion in the future, the distance felt essential for my well-being despite its difficulties. Cassidy and I developed a low-key, courteous communication style. She texted me to offer coffee to clear the air after we had been silent for several months. The chat that followed showed little self-awareness regarding her involvement in the dysfunction in the family, but at least it acknowledged that I had valid complaints about the state of the house. We settled into a routine of acknowledging holidays and birthdays without putting on any show of intimacy. Her marriage to Chase, meanwhile, was facing increasing challenges. Significant lifestyle changes brought about by his family's legal issues caused friction between them. Once a sign of safety, the house has now become a point of contention. It was impossible to sell without acknowledging defeat, yet it was too costly to maintain adequately on their diminished revenue. Posts on social media became much more infrequent and subdued. They occasionally showed glimmers of the deteriorating facade, strained smiles at what had previously been lavish celebrations, a chipped staircase in the background of a birthday picture. I got an unexpected email from my mother one spring afternoon that was abnormally warm. This communication was lengthy, considerate, and profoundly introspective in contrast to her customary succinct updates or circumspect approaches. She wrote about realizing that she had unintentionally passed on tendencies from her own childhood. She really apologized for the betrayal of the house and admitted the hurt her favoritism had caused. She wrote, "I persuaded myself that I was acting in the family's best interests. In reality, though, I was defending my own idea of what our family ought to be. I now see that the price of that vision was much too high, since it lost me my relationship with my amazing older daughter." She asked us to attempt family therapy at the end of the email, not to change the past but to establish better habits for the future. I consented to a trial session after speaking with my own therapist, and I went into it with cautious optimism, tempered by hard limits. The initial meeting was very fruitful. My father built on the insights he gained from his individual therapy under expert supervision. For what may have been the first time in our relationship, my mother listened without interjecting or arguing. I was able to express long-suppressed feelings without downplaying or allowing them to explode into fury. We were given homework that included reflection questions, communication activities, and a promise to keep going. The progress was gradual. Some sessions resulted in significant discoveries. Others resorted to well-known dysfunction, necessitating our therapist's intervention. But with time, a fresh insight surfaced. My parents realized the real consequences of what they had done. I started to recognize their complexity as individuals influenced by their own pasts and blind spots rather than as villains or victims. We came up with healthier ways to communicate while respecting certain limits. My private life subtly started to flourish during this time of family renovation. Rowan Blake, an architectural photographer whose work complemented my real estate experience, was introduced to me casually by a colleague. Clear communication, respect for each other's career goals, and a preference for quiet, comfortable evenings over boisterous social gatherings were all hallmarks of our relationship's refreshing ease of development. Most significantly, Rowan consistently respected my boundaries. He listened to me without passing judgment or applying pressure as I described my complicated family situation and the significance of upholding specific protection measures. His strong relationship with his parents served as an example for what balanced adult family relationships could entail, and his personal experience with difficult family dynamics naturally cultivated empathy. We had created a new normal by Christmas of the following year, 18 months after the wedding that had shattered our family. In order to establish neutral territory, the holiday dinner was held at my house rather than Cassidy's or my parents' apartment. Present giving stayed low-key, emphasizing consideration over ostentation. Discussions remained within predetermined parameters, avoiding situations that could bring up past disputes. Chase and Cassidy went. Despite efforts at festive happiness, their relationship was clearly strained. Their marriage was unable to endure the financial strains and long-held grudges, and the house that had previously been the focal point of our family's drama was now up for sale. My father's astute glance across the table spoke a lot about lessons acquired too late, even though none of them immediately acknowledged the irony. As I reflect on the turbulent path from treachery to hesitant reconciliation, I see that the house itself was never the main problem. It only served to solidify patterns that had been present throughout my early years. An unbalanced family structure, unequal expectations, and the constant disregard for my needs in favor of my sister's desires. An unanticipated chance for growth, even in the face of extreme hurt, was created by the agonizing experience, which compelled a confrontation with dynamics that would have persisted indefinitely otherwise. Slowly, the most important lesson became clear. Genuine familial ties cannot be bought with money or sustained only via accountability. Mutual respect, open communication, and an appreciation of each person's intrinsic worth, beyond their monetary contributions, are necessary for an authentic connection. When put to the test by competing interests, my readiness to provide for my parents' financial needs destroyed the appearance of intimacy. Learning that limits are necessary for wholesome relationships and are not selfish was equally significant. I made room for real healing rather than flimsy reconciliation by outlining exactly what I would and wouldn't tolerate. By setting limits, I was able to stay close to my parents while shielding myself from additional abuse, which was advantageous to all parties. Realizing that self-advocacy does not necessitate giving up compassion was maybe the most beneficial insight. I was able to respect my parents' limitations while maintaining my belief in my own value. Although their actions caused genuine hurt, I was able to forgive them after realizing the intricate circumstances that led to them without undervaluing culpability. I now realize that family ties need constant upkeep rather than presumed stability as I construct my life with intentionality rather than duty. Our relationships with family members should be fostered by open communication and respect for one another, not by unquestioning allegiance regardless of how we are treated. My connections with family, friends, coworkers, and lovers are all impacted by this awareness. The journey goes on with notable advancements interspersed with sporadic setbacks. Old habits are still triggered by some family get-togethers. Sensitive subjects are still carefully avoided in certain interactions. However, the basis has changed from unquestioning devotion to balanced reciprocity, making room for genuine connection instead of fulfilling predetermined roles. If you can relate to my tale, think about analyzing the implicit expectations in your own family dynamics. Do you give out of necessity or out of true love? Are your efforts appreciated and returned? Above all, do the dynamics of your family foster your development or restrict your potential? The responses could point to trends that should be addressed before they lead to an unpleasant encounter. And that's the thing with betrayal, it rips deep, but it also makes room for something better, says ChatGPT.noi. Retribution in the dramatic sense is not the subject of my story. It's about getting back up and choosing peace over anarchy. Living well and letting go of pain can sometimes be the best kind of retaliation. Try investing in yourself, establishing boundaries, or finding healing in silence rather than retaliation if you're harboring hurt. Have you ever had to leave relatives to keep your peace or been betrayed? I'd love to know how you discovered your strength, so please share your story in the comments section.